welcome back to the deep dive. This time we're tackling something that affects pretty much everyone.
Yeah.
Information security.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to be a tech expert to get this.
Right.
This deep dive is for anyone who uses a computer, stores data online,
Sure.
or just wants to keep their information safe, right?
Absolutely.
You guys sent in a ton of articles, research on security policies and principles.
Yep.
All sorts of frameworks, so
Yeah.
get ready to level up that security knowledge.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think what's really fascinating about security is how deeply woven it is into everything we do.
Okay.
Businesses, organizations, even just our daily lives.
Yeah.
We're going to try to unravel some of that.
Okay, I'm ready. Your notes are full of highlights.
Oh, yeah.
What jumped out at you first?
Well, it's common to think of security as purely an IT issue,
Right.
but it's not really. It's really a core aspect of business management.
Yeah. So you're saying it's not just about the IT folks.
Right. Exactly.
Can you kind of explain that a little more? I'll admit I usually just leave that to the IT folks.
Sure. Yeah, it's a common misconception.
Okay.
So think of it like this. IT or information systems are like the tools, the hardware, the software businesses use.
Mm-hmm.
Security is about ensuring that those tools are reliable and protected so that the business can function without disruption.
So it's like protecting the whole operation, not just the computer.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. You're also making me think about all the ways that things can go wrong, which is a little scary.
It is a little bit.
Yeah.
That's where things like risk assessments, vulnerability assessments, and penetration testing come in.
Okay.
These are like stress tests for your security.
Stress tests.
Yeah, like stress tests.
Okay, so can you break down those three for me? Because I'm all about preventing problems before they happen.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So a risk assessment, it's kind of like taking inventory. You identify your valuable assets, your data, systems, anything that's really critical, and you figure out, okay, what threats might target those.
Yeah.
Then you assess how vulnerable they are and calculate the overall risk.
So it's like a strategic way to figure out where you need to prioritize your defenses.
Exactly.
Okay, what about vulnerability assessments? Is that where you actually find the weaknesses?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
So vulnerability assessments, they use automated tools to scan your systems for known weaknesses.
So it's like a security checkup.
Yeah, just a checkup looking for common vulnerabilities that attackers could exploit.
And then you just patch those vulnerabilities, right?
That's the goal.
Okay.
Sometimes, though, you need a more hands-on approach
Okay.
to uncover vulnerabilities that automated scans might miss.
Uh-huh.
That's where penetration testing comes in.
Okay, that sounds a little more intense.
Yeah, a little bit.
What exactly does that involve?
Essentially, you have ethical hackers. These are like trusted security experts. They try to break into your systems using the same tactics as real attackers to find those vulnerabilities.
So it's like a controlled attack to help you find and fix weaknesses
Exactly.
before the bad guys can get in there.
That's right.
Okay.
It's kind of like a proactive security drill,
Yeah.
right?
That makes sense. But with technology constantly evolving, it just seems impossible to stay ahead of every threat.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing process. Security is definitely a journey, not a destination.
Right.
And that's why it's really important to understand some of those fundamental principles that can guide your security approach,
Okay.
like the CIA Triad.
CIA, like the spy agency?
No, not quite.
Okay.
In information security, CIA stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability.
Okay.
These are the foundation of keeping information safe.
All right, let's break it down.
Okay.
What exactly does confidentiality mean in this context?
So confidentiality is all about protecting sensitive information from unauthorized access. Think of it like this.
Okay.
You've got a super secret recipe for, like, the world's best cookies.
Okay. Yeah.
You wouldn't just share that with anyone.
Right. Absolutely not. Those cookies would be mine.
Exactly. Just like that secret recipe.
Okay.
Businesses have sensitive data they need to protect.
Right.
Customer information,
Yeah.
financial records, trade secrets. Confidentiality is making sure that only the right people can see that.
Okay, that makes sense. So confidentiality breaches would be like someone peeking at your recipe.
Exactly.
Permission.
That's right. And they can happen in a lot of different ways.
Right.
Hackers stealing data, even just sending an email to the wrong person.
Oh, yeah, that's happened to me before.
Yep.
It wasn't anything too sensitive, but yeah, it was a cringe moment.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Okay, so how do you actually prevent those kinds of breaches?
Well, there are a lot of different strategies, things like encryption.
Okay.
That's where you scramble the data so only someone with a key can read it.
Yeah.
Strict access controls and strong authentication procedures are all important.
So it's like putting multiple locks on your recipe box.
You got it. Layered protection.
Okay, confidentiality check. What about integrity?
Okay, so integrity.
Yeah.
It ensures the data is accurate and hasn't been tampered with.
Okay.
It's about making sure your information is trustworthy and reliable.
Okay.
So imagine if you found that recipe for those amazing cookies, but someone had gone and changed some of the ingredients.
So I would not be happy about that. My cookies would be ruined.
Exactly. And that's why data integrity is so important.
Okay.
For businesses, this could mean making sure financial reports haven't been manipulated.
Right.
Or customer data hasn't been changed without authorization.
Okay, so what could threaten data integrity? I mean, is it just hackers messing things up?
It can be intentional, like hackers trying to mislead people.
Right.
But it can also be accidental, like coding errors in software.
Okay.
Or even someone accidentally typing in the wrong information.
So it's like, someone deliberately adding salt to your cookie dough versus someone accidentally spilling salt in it.
I agree.
Either way, the cookies are ruined.
Right. Both of those compromise the integrity.
Yeah.
And that can be a serious consequence, especially when you think about medical records or financial transactions.
Wow. Yeah, that is a scary thought. So how do you protect data integrity? Is it similar to confidentiality?
There's some overlap, but some specific measures include things like strict access controls, intrusion detection systems to catch suspicious activity, and data encryption to prevent unauthorized changes.
So it's like having a security system around your recipe box and a way to verify that no one's messed with the recipe itself.
You got it. Layers of protection again.
Okay, 2 down, 1 to go.
Right.
Availability, what role does that play in the CIA Triad?
Okay, so availability means making sure that information and resources are accessible to those who need them when they need them.
Okay.
It's about keeping those systems up and running smoothly.
So if we go back to our cookie analogy, it's like making sure you have all the ingredients and tools ready to go when you're ready to bake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what if, right as you're about to start baking, your oven breaks down?
That would be a problem.
Yeah, huge problem.
Yeah.
For a business, this could be something like their website crashing.
Right.
Or a hospital's computer systems going offline. No access to critical patient data.
Wow. Okay. High stakes.
Very high stakes.
What sorts of things can threaten availability?
Could be anything from hardware malfunctions,
Right.
software bugs,
Sure.
natural disasters,
Yeah.
power outages,
Okay.
even malicious attacks like denial of service attacks.
Denial of service attacks?
Yeah.
What are those?
So think of it like this. Imagine a huge crowd of people all trying to squeeze into your kitchen at the same time.
Oh, that sounds chaotic. I wouldn't be able to bake anything.
Exactly. That's the point of a denial of service attack.
Okay.
Attackers flood a system with so much traffic, it overwhelms the resources and makes it unavailable to legitimate users.
Gotcha.
They're preventing you from baking, in this case, accessing a website
Yeah.
by clogging up the system.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
How do you protect against that then?
Well, it involves strategies like building redundant systems,
Okay.
having backups ready to go if the primary one fails,
Right.
strong access controls to limit who can even get in there in the first place,
Mm-hmm.
and using firewalls to block malicious traffic.
So it's like having a spare oven, making sure only authorized people can enter the kitchen.
Exactly.
Having a bouncer at the door.
Right, keeping those unwanted guests out.
So we've got confidentiality, integrity, and availability.
CIA Triad.
Protecting our precious cookie recipe.
Right.
But there's got to be more to this, right?
There's a lot more.
Yeah.
A whole world beyond the CIA Triad.
Well, I'm ready to dive in.
Right.
But let's take a quick break here, and we'll come back and explore some of those concepts in part 2 of our security deep dive. In part 1, we dug into the core principles of the CIA Triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and saw how those play out in real-life scenarios.
Yeah, it's amazing how those concepts apply to just about everything.
It really is. Now, I'm curious about this chapter also introduces what it calls the evil twin of the CIA Triad, DAD. What's that all about?
DAD stands for disclosure, alteration, and destruction. Basically, the flip side of what we want with the CIA Triad.
So CIA is what we're trying to avoid. Makes sense, but this chapter throws a curveball. It says too much security can actually be a bad thing. How's that even possible?
Well, have you ever worked somewhere with so many security protocols that it was almost impossible to get anything done?
Oh, yeah, I think I know what you mean.
That's overprotection in action.
I can see how too much security could stifle productivity. But is that really that common?
It definitely happens. Think about a company that requires like multiple layers of approval just to access a file, or a system with such complex passwords that everyone ends up writing them down on sticky notes.
Yeah, that defeats the whole purpose. So finding the right balance is key then. You need security that's effective, but not so cumbersome that it creates new problems.
Precisely. This chapter lays out 5 key components of a strong security framework, often called AAA services.
Wait, AAA, like the roadside assistance?
Not quite. In information security, AAA means identification, authentication, authorization, auditing, and accounting.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break it down for me.
Imagine you're entering a secure building. First, you show your ID. That's identification. Then you swipe your badge to prove it's you. Authentication. Next, you're only allowed into certain areas. Based on your clearance level, that's authorization. Cameras are recording your movements, that's auditing. And finally, all your actions are logged, so you're accountable for what you do. That's accounting.
Okay, I see. That's a helpful way to visualize it. But how does this all work in the digital world? I mean, websites don't have security guards checking IDs.
Right, that's where it gets interesting. Think about logging into your online bank account. You enter your username, identifying yourself. Then your password authenticates you. Once you're in, you can only access certain features based on your account permissions. That's authorization. All your transactions are logged and monitored. Auditing and accounting in action.
So these AAA principles are working behind the scenes, even if we don't see them. It's like the foundation of a secure system.
Exactly.
That organizations use to protect themselves.
Right. Well, building on those basic principles, there's a powerful concept called defense in depth, also known as layering.
Defense in depth. Okay, that sounds serious.
It is, but think of it like this. Imagine you're protecting a valuable treasure. You wouldn't just rely on one lock on the treasure chest, right?
Right.
You'd probably have multiple layers of security, like guards, walls,
Yeah.
maybe a moat with crocodiles, who knows?
Okay, so you're saying in cybersecurity, defense in depth means having multiple layers of security controls.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Each one acts as a separate barrier.
Right.
So if an attacker gets through one layer,
They still have to deal with the next one.
yeah, making it much harder to reach their target.
Can you give me a real-world example of that?
Sure. Let's say you're trying to protect a company's financial data.
Okay.
The first layer might be a firewall, which acts like a gatekeeper, controlling what comes in and out of the network.
So the firewall is like the first line of defense?
Right, exactly.
Keeping out unwanted visitors?
That's right.
Okay.
But even if an attacker slips past the firewall, you might have an intrusion detection system.
Okay.
As the next layer, this constantly watches for anything suspicious.
So it's like security cameras, motion detectors.
You got it. And then to protect the data itself, you might have encryption
Okay.
that scrambles the data so it's unreadable without the key.
So even if they get their hands on the data, they can't do anything with it.
Right, it's like that treasure chest locked with multiple locks.
Just with a different key.
Exactly. And that's just a basic example. Organizations might have many more layers.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is. Strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, regular audits, you name it.
Okay, that seems pretty effective, but wouldn't managing all those measures make things really complicated?
You're right, that's an important point.
Yeah.
Layering is important, but those layers have to work well together.
Right.
You don't want to make things too complex.
Okay.
That's where defense and breadth comes in.
Defense and breadth. What's that?
It's about making sure your security controls are diverse. Think of it like
Okay.
if you built a wall out of bricks and someone found a weakness in those bricks, the whole wall could crumble.
Right.
But if you use a mix of materials, bricks, stones, steel, it becomes much more resilient.
Okay, so you're saying it's about having a mix of security controls.
Right. Different vendors, different approaches.
Spreading the risk.
Exactly. If one vendor has a flaw, it won't take down your whole security.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we've got defense in depth, defense in breadth. What other techniques do organizations use to kind of simplify all this?
Well, one important concept is abstraction.
Abstraction. I haven't heard that term in this context.
Essentially, abstraction is about grouping similar things together to simplify complex systems.
Okay.
Kind of like organizing your kitchen.
Right.
Instead of having spice jars all over the place, you put them together in a spice rack.
Yeah. Easier to find and manage.
Exactly.
Okay.
So in security, instead of managing permissions for every single employee, you group them into roles.
Like manager, engineer.
Right, salesperson.
And then you apply security to the roles instead of to each individual person.
Exactly. It makes it much easier to manage, less chance of mistakes.
That seems way more efficient.
It is.
It's interesting how those concepts we use in everyday life,
Yeah.
like organization and simplifying, also apply to cybersecurity.
They really do.
Yeah.
Another example is data hiding.
Data hiding. Tell me more about that.
Think about it like this. You have a secret diary.
Yeah.
And you want to keep it safe.
Yeah.
You wouldn't just leave it out. You might hide it under your mattress or something.
And I used to do that all the time.
Right. Made it feel safe. So data hiding works similarly, concealing sensitive data by storing it in places that are hard to find.
So it's like a virtual hiding spot?
Yeah, but it's not just hoping no one will find it.
Okay.
That's the difference between data hiding and security through obscurity.
Right.
Data hiding uses techniques to make the data itself inaccessible.
Even if they know where it is.
Right, exactly.
Like, can you give me an example?
One example is steganography.
Steganography.
Yeah, it's hiding messages within other messages.
So you could hide a message in a picture or a music file.
Exactly. It's like invisible ink.
Wow, that's pretty sneaky.
It is.
Okay, so that's hiding the data, but how do you make it unreadable even if someone finds it?
That's where encryption comes in.
Encryption, yeah, I hear that word all the time.
Right.
I'm not sure I totally get how it works.
Think of it as using a secret code to scramble a message.
Okay.
Only someone who knows the code can unscramble it.
So like a coded message, only the recipient can read.
Exactly. It uses complex algorithms to make it unreadable. Even if someone intercepts it, it's just gibberish without the key.
So that's how my credit card details stay safe when I'm shopping online.
That's one example, but it's also important for protecting data stored on your computer or servers.
So it's like a double layer of protection.
Yeah, one for data in motion, one for data at rest.
Okay, that makes sense.
So encryption is a fundamental way to keep things confidential and maintain that data integrity.
Okay, so we've talked about layers, different approaches, and hiding data.
Mm-hmm.
But how do organizations organize all this? It seems like it could be chaotic without some kind of framework.
You're right. It's not just individual techniques.
Right.
It's about how they're managed and work together.
Okay.
That's where security boundaries come in.
Security boundaries, what are those?
Think about your house.
Okay.
You have different rooms with different security needs.
Right.
A fence, locks on doors, maybe an alarm system.
Yeah.
Each of those creates a boundary,
Okay.
separating areas with different security needs.
Makes sense. I wouldn't put the same lock on my bedroom door as my front door.
Exactly. In cybersecurity, it's similar.
Okay.
You define areas with different security needs and control the flow of information between them.
So like a company might have a boundary between its network and the internet
Right.
to keep out threats.
Exactly. They might have boundaries between departments, too.
Like different security clearances for different areas.
You got it.
Okay.
And controlling that flow of information is key.
How do they actually do that?
There are a few ways.
Okay.
Firewalls, like we said, act as gatekeepers for network traffic.
Right.
Access controls limit who can access certain data.
Based on their role.
Right. And permissions.
Okay.
Intrusion detection systems watch for any unauthorized attempts to cross those boundaries.
So it's like a combination of technical things and policies.
Exactly. And just like physical security, clearly marking those boundaries is important.
So everyone knows where the lines are.
Exactly. It's like signs that say authorized personnel only.
Right. Restricted area.
Right. It's all about creating that controlled environment.
Okay. That's making a lot of sense.
Yeah,
It's not just the technology itself, it's how it all works together.
it is.
It seems like a clear strategy is crucial.
It is, absolutely. And that's where security governance comes in.
Okay.
It's the framework that directs and oversees a company's security.
So it's like the blueprint for how they manage security.
Exactly. And a key part of that is a top-down approach.
Top down, what does that mean?
It means senior management sets the tone.
Okay.
They support the security initiatives.
Right. It can't just be the IT department's job.
Exactly. It has to be a priority for everyone.
Yeah. If the leaders don't care, no one else will.
That's right.
Okay.
So there's often a security board or a committee
Okay.
that sets policies, makes sure they align with company goals, that kind of thing.
So they're responsible for the overall strategy.
Exactly.
Okay.
And they do regular assessments and audits.
To make sure everything's working.
That's right. Very important role.
It is. Okay. So strong governance means leadership, clear policies, and that ongoing oversight.
Right.
Organization.
Exactly. It can't be an afterthought. It needs to be woven into the fabric of your organization, from the supply chain to software development.
And that's where due diligence and due care come in, right? This chapter emphasizes those as crucial for security governance. But to be honest, I always found those terms a little vague.
I understand. Due diligence is all about doing your homework, proactively identifying risks, and taking steps to mitigate them.
So it's about doing risk assessments, developing security policies,
Yeah.
and implementing security controls. It's about having a plan.
Exactly. And due care is about actually putting those plans into action, making sure those security measures are implemented well and maintained day in and day out.
Like having a fire escape plan versus actually practicing using it. Both are important.
That's a great analogy. And demonstrating due diligence and due care isn't just good practice, it's also important legally if a breach happens. It can help protect an organization from liability.
So it's not just about protecting data, but also your organization's reputation and legal standing.
Absolutely. And this leads us to the last piece this chapter covers, the security policy hierarchy.
Okay, so this isn't just a single document. What does this hierarchy look like?
It's structured more like a pyramid. At the top, you have the overarching security policy, outlining the organization's high-level security goals and objectives.
So it's the big picture. What comes next?
Below that, you have standards. They define specific requirements for security controls and technologies.
So the standards get more concrete, laying out the must-haves in terms of security measures.
Exactly. Then you have baselines, establishing minimum security levels for different systems or departments. A baseline might say that all servers must have specific firewall rules, or that all employees need strong passwords.
So baselines help ensure a consistent level of security across the organization. What comes after that?
Below baselines, you have guidelines, which are more flexible recommendations for implementing security measures. They're like best practices, suggestions for how to achieve those security goals.
Okay, so guidelines offer some flexibility. What's at the very bottom of the pyramid?
At the bottom are procedures. These are detailed step-by-step instructions for carrying out specific security tasks, like changing a password or reporting a security incident.
So the security policy hierarchy provides a framework for thinking about security comprehensively and consistently. It helps make sure everyone in the organization is on the same page.
Exactly. And having these clear, documented policies and procedures, it's also essential for demonstrating due diligence and due care.
It all comes full circle. We've covered a lot today, from the business impact of security breaches to the importance of threat modeling and supply chain security, and having a strong security policy structure. But what about risks from outside the company? How do they manage that?
That's a great question. Many companies rely on outside vendors,
Yeah.
and those vendors can bring security risks.
Right. Cloud storage, security firms, all sorts of things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where third-party governance comes in.
Okay.
It's managing the risks that come with using those vendors.
So it's making the companies they work with are secure too.
Exactly.
Okay.
It means looking closely at their security practices, making sure they meet your standards.
How do they actually go about doing that?
A few different ways.
Okay.
They might do on-site assessments,
Okay.
review the vendor's documentation,
Right.
maybe even require a third-party audit.
So it's really doing your homework.
It is. Don't just assume a vendor's secure.
Right.
You have to be proactive.
Yeah, that's a good reminder.
Yeah, it's easy to overlook those third-party risks.
Definitely. We've covered a lot in this part of our deep dive. How organizations actually put these controls in place, how they manage everything, and create those boundaries.
It is a lot.
Yeah, I'm really starting to see how this all fits together.
Right, it's a whole ecosystem.
Yeah,
But getting those fundamentals is key.
absolutely. Well, I'm excited to keep going.
Okay.
Let's take a break here and we'll come back for the final part of our security deep dive, where we'll explore some of those proactive security measures, threat modeling, and the whole world of supply chain risk management. Welcome back to the final part of our information security deep dive.
Yeah.
We've laid a lot of groundwork, those essential principles, how it works in the real world, the importance of governance. Now I'm really excited to talk about, being proactive about security
Yeah, I'm sorry.
instead of just reacting to threats.
Right. Proactive security is all about thinking like the bad guys,
Oh.
anticipating those threats before they can even exploit them.
So it's almost like being ahead in a chess game, not just reacting, but really thinking about what they might do next.
That's a great analogy. It's about taking control
Yeah.
instead of always playing catch-up.
So how do organizations actually do that?
Well, one of the most effective methods is threat modeling.
Threat modeling. Okay, I've heard that term before.
Yeah.
Can you remind me what that is?
It's a process where you systematically identify, analyze, and prioritize potential threats.
So you're basically putting yourself in the shoes of an attacker and thinking, how could I break into this system?
Exactly. Brainstorming all the ways someone could exploit weaknesses.
I imagine that takes a lot of creativity.
It does. But it's not just about coming up with a list of threats. It's
Yeah.
about understanding the likelihood of each one, the impact if it happened,
Okay.
and then figuring out how to mitigate those risks.
So it's about prioritizing based on what's most likely and what would have the biggest impact.
Exactly. And there are a few different approaches to threat modeling.
Okay.
One common method is the defensive approach, which focuses on integrating security right from the design phase.
So you're building security in from the very beginning,
Exactly, preventing those vulnerabilities before they even exist.
rather than trying to fix them later.
Right. It's much more effective.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But of course, you can't always foresee every threat.
Right.
That's where the reactive approach comes in.
Okay, so that's more about responding to threats that have already emerged.
Right. Or testing your existing defenses.
So things like penetration testing, ethical hacking,
Exactly.
bringing in those experts to try and break in.
That's right. Find the weaknesses before someone else does.
Okay, so threat modeling can be both proactive and reactive.
Exactly.
Are there specific frameworks that people use to guide this process?
Absolutely. There are several popular ones.
Okay.
One is STRIDE.
Stride.
Yeah, it stands for spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
It is. But it covers a lot of ground.
So those are the categories of threats that Stride helps you address.
Exactly. By considering each of those, you can identify a lot of potential vulnerabilities.
What are some other frameworks?
Another one is PASTA, which stands for Process for Attack Simulation and Threat Analysis.
Okay.
It's more risk-centric, aligning security with the value of what you're protecting.
So making sure your security investment matches the potential impact.
Exactly. Prioritize and use your resources wisely.
Makes sense. Any others?
There's also VAST, Visual, Agile, and Simple Threat.
So that one is more about, making it easier to understand and use.
Exactly. It's designed to be more user-friendly, especially for teams using agile methods.
It seems that there's a framework for every approach.
There really is. The best one depends on the organization and what they're trying to protect.
Okay, so we've got threat modeling as this powerful, proactive tool.
Mm.
What else can organizations do to stay ahead of the game?
One area that's often overlooked is supply chain risk management.
Supply chain risk management. Okay, I'm not familiar with that one.
So, it's recognizing that your security is only as strong as the weakest link in your supply chain.
Okay.
If one of your suppliers has a security breach, it could affect you too.
Right, because companies rely on so many external partners these days.
Exactly. And you can't always control their security practices.
Yeah.
You might be super secure, but if your supplier isn't, it creates a vulnerability.
Can you give me some examples of what could go wrong?
One common one is counterfeit hardware or software.
Okay.
You might think you're getting legitimate components, but they could be fakes with malicious code.
So it's like intentional sabotage?
It can be.
Yeah.
And those attacks can be very hard to detect.
That's really scary.
It is a growing problem.
Are there other examples?
Another risk is malicious code being injected during manufacturing.
Okay.
Maybe a rogue employee or a hacker who gets into the supplier system.
Wow. It seems like the possibilities are endless.
It's definitely a challenge.
Yeah.
That's why supply chain risk management is so important.
Yep.
Understanding the risks, putting controls in place, and constantly monitoring for problems.
So how do they actually manage those risks?
Well, one of the most important things is to vet your suppliers carefully.
Okay.
Don't just go for the cheapest option.
Right.
Make sure they have strong security practices.
So doing your research is key.
It is. Ask for documentation, understand their incident response plans, maybe even do on-site audits.
So it's about communication, setting expectations up front,
Absolutely. And having clear contracts that hold them accountable.
not just relying on trust.
Right. And then ongoing monitoring is essential.
Okay.
Stay informed about any incidents or vulnerabilities that affect them,
Right.
and be ready to respond quickly if something happens.
So it's like a security radar, constantly looking out for threats.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Supply chain risk management is an ongoing process.
Wow, this deep dive has been so informative.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
We've covered so much, from the basics to the complex strategies.
Right.
I feel like I have a much better grasp on how security works.
That's great to hear. It's a complex field. But these fundamentals are important for everyone.
Absolutely. So for our listeners, what's the key takeaway here?
I think the main message is that security is everyone's responsibility.
Okay.
It's not just about companies protecting us. We all have a role to play.
So what can individuals do to be more proactive about their own security? It can feel overwhelming sometimes.
It can,
Yeah.
but there are simple things you can do.
Okay.
Be mindful of the information you share online.
Right.
Use strong passwords. Enable multi-factor authentication.
Yeah, those are important.
Absolutely. A weak password is like leaving your door wide open.
Okay.
And multi-factor authentication adds an extra layer of security.
What else?
Be careful about clicking links in emails, especially if they look suspicious. Keep your software updated. Back up your important data.
So it's about taking those proactive steps.
Exactly. Making security part of your daily routine.
Yeah, and remembering that knowledge is power.
Absolutely. The more you understand, the better you can protect yourself.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
It's been my pleasure. Stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay secure.
That's great advice. We'll be back with another deep dive soon, but until then, keep exploring.